Good day, my name is Christelle from France de Klerk, Independent Technical Analyst. Rian wanted us to look at Sygnia. The share found strong support in oversold levels around R7.49 and had a massive 78% spike back to R13.60. And now the big question is, where do we take profit? Now the high that needs to be overcome is waiting at R14.95 and even R15, which is last week's high. Above R15, Rian, we can assume that the share can continue to higher levels and maybe go back to that previous resistance waiting at R18.74. However, a rising channel has developed here on Sygnia, which means that a rising channel is a negative formation, and I'm going to use that, not that upper, I'm going to show you now. Because when that lower band on Sygnia changes into a resistance, this line, and that is waiting at R13.60. Should that level change into a resistance, this rising channel can take Sygnia, and I take the width of the channel, project it downwards from where it will be confirmed, means Sygnia can go back to my 40-week moving average, and that is waiting at R11.44. Above 15, which is last week's high, I can assume that the momentum to the top can continue again. But below 1360, that rising channel can spark some profit taking. Take note, it is overbought, it's approaching overbought levels, but my two stochastic lines are still pointing upwards, which tells me the momentum to the top is in place. Last week's extremely big Marubozu candle of 10% also implies that the bulls are stronger and that they are keen to take this share to higher levels. Let's just move back and look at a bigger picture here. We can see I've spoken about that resistance, and obviously that next resistance is waiting there around 1874, but below 1360 and below that 40-week moving average, Sygnia would be a concern. I hope that you are considering taking profit in this share and not trying to get in, because the best place to enter into any instrument is when it's oversold, it stops making lows, starts making higher lows. There are turnaround candles or turnaround patterns that imply that the sellers have dried up and that the buyers are left. It's very dangerous to buy a share after it's had such a massive rally. Rowan wanted us to look at British American Tobacco. I'm assuming it's the one listed on the JSE, and we can see that this beautiful morning star formation, Rowan, confirmed the turnaround for BTI. Pullback, negative bearish candle, followed by a doji, and in this case this is a gravestone doji candle, and followed by a strong bullish engulfing candle, implies a beautiful morning star formation. It tells us that the end of the pullback or the end of the profit taking is in place and the share is reaching for higher levels. But I want to draw your attention, Rowan, to the 40-week moving average, that red line, and that is waiting at 610.12. Have a look at what BTI did in the week of the 28th of September. It rallied, touched the 40-week moving average at 626.97 and retraced from it. So it will be very interesting to see what it does when it reaches 610.12, which is in this case where my red line is waiting. If BTI can change that level into a support, it will be seen as very positive, and the long-term sentiment towards the share will change to positive. Yes, I still have some room for upside on British American Tobacco. After last week's rally, I think I would be careful to get in now, rather sit on your hands and wait for a decent pullback again, and then buy when it's oversold. To chase momentum is always dangerous, but there are critical levels that needs to change into a support. We've spoken about the 40-week, obviously that high there of 626, and then that strong resistance waiting at 731 Rand 24 that needs to change into a support. I'm just scanning to see if I can see a window on BTI, because it's always nice, especially on a weekly graph. Now there's none that I can see on a weekly graph, to look for windows, because it's such a nice target that you can almost white knuckle through to hold on, because you know that window is going to close at some stage. British American Tobacco, Rowan, will be a concern when these lows waiting at 507 Rand 57 changes into a resistance again. Zahid wanted us to look at Aspen. Ticker on our exchange, APN. We can see at the moment, as I head, that our 40-week moving average, 123.33, has changed into a support. This means my long-term sentiment is positive. But I want to draw your attention to my left shoulder. Or I should say a possible left shoulder, because I really hope that this is not a left shoulder, a head, and maybe building on the right shoulder. So Aspen must change these levels, waiting at 112 Rand 12 into 125 Rand 12, into a support, and keep it a support in order to sustain the momentum to the top and fight that resistance that is waiting at 165.14. If it finds resistance here and retrace again, and this neckline that I've drawn in here, waiting at 112.24, starts to change into a resistance, Aspen would be a concern. And the target, and I'm going to use just the right shoulder, which is my most conservative target here, can take Aspen back to 90 Rand 38. And if I take the length of my left shoulder, it can take it back to 59 Rand 87. So it needs to get above these 125, 126 levels, remain above it in order to sustain the momentum to the top. I mean, the share has had such a beating if I look back at the history and where it's come from. But do not ignore on a weekly graph if a share starts to change its 40-week moving average into a resistance. Sometimes it's just a small whistle, but sometimes it's more like a cathedral bell that is going off to warn investors that the sentiment is changing to negative. Darlene wanted us to look at Bitcoin. Massive rally the last couple of days, and the big question is, are investors seeing this as a safe haven? Now, Darlene, I want to go a little bit back and just highlight this inverse head and shoulder formation that was on Bitcoin, and I hope that you've spotted it. Left shoulder, head, right shoulder. And the full target of Bitcoin has played out. I mean, if we go back, it's played out completely, even a little bit more than that. But we know that this is now a lamp pole formation. Too fast, too soon. If I look at the support that it's found here around a 10,103, 82% spike in a couple of weeks, very dangerous. Why do I say that? Because if you plant a lamp pole and the foundation is not deep enough, we know what's going to happen. I mean, it will destroy everything in its way when it falls over. But now the big thing is, do you want to maybe consider a short on Bitcoin? Yes, it is extremely overbought. Your stochastic looks like it, that K line looks like it wants to break through that orange line. The confirmation will be on the table when it does. And you want to wait for some turnaround candle, tweezer top, long tail at the bottom, at the top, implying that the selling pressure is fierce. But the critical level is actually waiting at the high from the previous time, and that is waiting in that week of the 11th of December 2017, and that is sitting at 10,666. Above that level, we can assume again that the momentum to the top can escalate, but assuming Bitcoin does not go back to that high again, finds resistance here at 18,483 and pulls back, that will be a negative indication, because that will be seen as a possible lower high, because this high is lower than this high. But assuming it comes all the way back, it's always, from a technical perspective, it's always dangerous when you've got two massive spikes in any instrument. And I'm not using this one as a leg because it needs to go back to the neckline. It needs to touch it, all right? So I've got massive spikes, which means if this level at 3,168, where it's found previous support here in December 2018, starts to change into a resistance, Bitcoin can go back to zero. I know it sounds impossible, but it can happen if the sellers are stronger and there's no buyers. All right, so critical level, obviously the low of this week, 15,875. Critical level, 40-week moving average, 10,065. Stop loss you will use if you want to take a brave short, 18,483. Give it some breathing space, make it 18,500. And then obviously critical levels to the bottom is 13,807 as a support, and then 11,431. It has been a massive rally, and I think for a trader, they can maybe consider a nice short. But let's see how this plays out. If this becomes a double top, I really hope it doesn't. But I mean, you never know. Mpo, long for life, L for L. Long for Life, the outdoor warehouse, sportsman's warehouse, and sorbet brand. Mpo, I don't know if you've watched last week or previous sessions, but we've spoken about that double bottom on Long for Life. And that double bottom has now been confirmed when 3 Rand at 33 changed into a support. Now, a double bottom is a positive formation. It tells us that the sellers have dried up, that the buyers are left. And that is normally an indication that the bottom of the share is in place. And now the big question is, well, what is the target? It's the length of the right or the left leg projected upwards from where it will be confirmed, which means Long for Life can go back to 4 Rand 10. I will be concerned about this share, one, if my red line, the 40-week moving average, waiting at 2 Rand 92, changes into a resistance. But more importantly, when this support that is waiting at 2 Rand 55 changes into a resistance, we can assume again that Long for Life can retrace further. Have a look here. The last time Long for Life changed the 40-week into a support and kept it one was back in the week of the 23rd of April 2019. It did it for a couple of weeks, could not sustain it, and just plummeted lower. Tested it here, could not change it into a support, plummeted lower. So let's hope it changes it now into a support and keep it one. This was a ugly double top formation, and sometimes you'll see double tops and double bottoms sometimes on a graph keeps on showing up, so it's what investors or the informed capital, how they invest and trade the share that makes these pattern form. But the double top was the turnaround, and that was back in July 2018. That was a warning for investors that the top in the share is in place, and ever since then it just plummeted. So let's hope that this double bottom now be the turnaround story for Long for Life to take it to higher levels. Please don't forget to send through your requests for next week's show. Have a fabulous week. Take care.